Hello and welcome back to the Talking Wolves podcast. It's the first of the new season. We've missed you all. We've definitely missed doing the podcast. And as you can see, we're joined by two Talking Wolves regulars. We'll start with the main man himself, Dave Azzopardi. Dave, how you been keeping, mate? How's your summer been?
Yeah, it's all right, mate. It's gone quick, hasn't it? But yeah, look, didn't manage to do too many of the pre-season games. Managed to catch them all, but I only went to the Luton game. Probably the most boring game out of the lot, to be fair. But enjoyed it, mate. Enjoyed a bit of time off, but ready to crack on again.
How did you manage to see all the games? I take it you paid the $4.99 every single time.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Wolves took plenty of my money. Yeah, definitely.
Jord, good to see you again, my friend. How's life been? Where you been jetting off to recently?
You know what? For myself, been quite quiet, you know. So I haven't been anywhere too extravagant recently. Actually, no, Vegas was when we sold Neves, wasn't it? So yeah, Vegas. Yeah. But then other than that, I haven't been so far. I mean, there's been a lot of trouble in Tel Aviv, so I've not been over to that office for a while. But no, from a Wolves point of view, it's all fun and games, isn't it? Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts, and I think it's going to be quite an interesting pod. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, I mean, at the start of the season or the end of last season, Lopetegui said he wanted all his players in by July the 1st. And, you know, August the 7th is record this, and it looks like he's getting exactly what he wanted. Not quite. But as you can see, we're not alone. We're also joined by Sky Sports' Johnny Phillips. Johnny, pleasure to see you again, my friend. How have you been keeping? Working hard?
Yeah, well, I've had a quiet time over the summer, but it's just about to kick off again. Season's underway, and I'm sure I'll be very busy over the coming weeks.
Yeah, you were up in Leeds, weren't you, at the weekend for the game?
Yeah, it was a good one to do that. I mean, even though they've got relegated, there was a real buzz around the place. It's great ground, Ellen Road, and they came back brilliantly. So I think they'll be safe under Daniel Farke. Safe pair of hands will get them back up quite quickly, I think. But it was good. It was good atmosphere.
Yeah, but you have been quite busy, haven't you, with a little project? You're bringing out a book, I believe.
Yeah, it's been a long time in the making. I've done it with Paul Berry, who's a brilliant writer and a man, who's incredibly well connected at the club, both from the perspective of working inside for the club and also from being a supporter, a lifelong supporter since the 1980s. And it's called Revolution of Wolves, and it's really the story of the club in the Premier League era since their first promotion 20 years ago to the present day. And it essentially, we've called it a Premier League trilogy because it's three very distinct parts. It's the first promotion with Sir Jack Hayward as owner and Dave Jones as manager. The second promotion with Steve Morgan as owner and Mick McCarthy as manager. And then, of course, the Fosun era with Nuno, and how the club has progressed, developed. We've called it the Revolution of Wolves because it has been a revolution. But it's been brilliant to write, and we're really proud of what we've got at the end of it, and I hope Wolves fans will enjoy it too.
Is there any interesting excerpts out the book? Anyone you've spoken to in the book that fans will be excited about?
I think there's a nice bit with Paul Ince. I got down to Reading's training ground when he was manager there last season with Alex Ray. Him and Alex Ray are best mates now, but they hated each other when they first joined the club. Or when I think Ince followed Ray, and when Ray tells a story about when he heard it on the radio that Paul Ince was signing, he was devastated. And Paul Ince similarly tells a story about how he went through the list of those in the Wolves squad thinking, yeah, he's all right. Got as far as Ray and thought, I hate this man. And he used a lot stronger words than I hate this man. And there they are, best mates 20 years later, which probably says all you need to know about that team. And then more recently, it was brilliant just getting underneath the skin of Nuno's revolution. We spoke to players like Ryan Bennett, Connor Cody, Diogo Jota, Ruben Neves, and two or three of Nuno's coaching staff as well. And they really, the first time I understood the five at the back rather, I got exactly what he's doing. You knew what you were watching, but I could never understand why it was so successful in the Premier League. I could never understand why Manchester City and these other teams couldn't come to terms with it. But they really unpicked that for us, and they really explained what Nuno is doing in brilliant terms. So that's probably our favourite part of the book when it gets to the Fosun era and the real revolution we've seen, and just how they went about turning Wolves from these sort of Championship also runs into this proper serious Premier League team.
Yeah, I remember when we were at the Molyneux Sleep Out, you were telling me about the book and the segment around that and Nuno's Wolves and just how good it was, and I was intrigued. But you've got an event, haven't you, at the Cleveland next Thursday, I believe, to launch the book.
This coming Thursday, the 10th of August. It's free in. There'll be a Q&A with me and Paul Berry. There's a quiz, which will be quite good fun. A quiz on the last 20 years of Wolves. There'll also be a season preview, which sounds like a good time to be doing a season preview. I don't think we've ever gone into a season like this one before. And it'll be just a good chance to catch up with lots of people connected with Wolves, have a drink, enjoy the night and talk about Wolves, because it's been a long summer. So much has happened. So much could yet still happen. So it'd be great to see anyone around who can come down to the Cleveland from 7 o'clock onwards. And it's free admission, so just turn up on the night.
Oh, brilliant.
And there's a donation as well, isn't it, to a really important charity close to Jason Guy's heart too.
That's right. There's you get a couple of quid discount on the book, and then also we're also giving some within that discount. We're giving a further amount to the IP36 family, which is really close to Jason Guy, that the Wolf Whistle pod host, who's kindly hosting the night for us. So there's 2 reasons to get down. You get the discount; it's free in, but there's also be that contribution that we're making from what you pay as well. And so hopefully we'll raise a good bit for charity on the night too.
Third reason as well, Johnny might buy you a beer.
Yeah, I might, depending on sales.
He might do. It depends how generous he's feeling.
I'm from Liverpool, Matt. We're all generous in this.
Oh, fellas, what a summer we've had. We wanted an exciting summer. We thought we might get one in terms of incomings, but it's been quite a difference. So the kind of media fed nonsense of 10 or 15 million pound signings that we needed to sell to buy Dave has now gone from that to recouping nearly 100 million pound in transfer revenue, and only 2 players coming in the form of Matt Doherty and Tom King. Are you shocked at all with this, Dave?
Yeah, I'm shocked. I'm surprised. I think you've said it before, Matt. I'm quite a firm believer of sort of judge the transfer window when it's closed, but it sounds like there's whispers from the club that there might not be another transfer, and I think that would mean it's a disastrous window for Wolves, who could have really kicked on. Lopetegui had that little bit of momentum. I know he slowed down towards the end of the season, but he had momentum. He had the ability and potential to build a really strong squad. Again, I've said I think our first 11 is good. It's strong. It's a good Premier League 11. But outside of that, a couple of suspensions or injuries, which we saw quite a few suspensions last year, and we can be in a little bit of trouble. So I am disappointed about the transfer business. I think it could have and should have been obviously a lot better and stronger.
Jord, I know you've been chomping at the bit to talk about this. Our group chat over the last probably.
He keeps asking me to do Twitter Spaces, Jord, but he always asks me when I'm not out or whatever.
I don't think I've seen Jord use the word shambles so much in a 2-month period. How are you feeling about this summer, Jord?
No, I think obviously though after the start, after the end of the season, and we already had those sort of stories coming out from the media. It's going to be a more difficult window than we've experienced. Understandably, Cunha and Boubacar Traoré money was going to be recognised in this transfer window, and we've already outlaid 65 million quid, so we had to be a bit careful. Yeah, for me, I don't necessarily buy it in terms of from a Fosun point of view. I understand FFP's there; it's there for a reason and stuff. But for me, even the Jeff Shee, and I'll probably get into it a little bit more detail. The Jeff Shee sort of statement the other day, I think it's more so Fosun wanting to recuperate some of the losses and some of the money they wrote off a debt last year for about 126 million pound. I feel like there's also been a lot of bad investment over the windows, which we're now being paying the price for. You can look at the Guedes money, Catrone money, Fabio Silva's probably overpaid for still, and that's sort of coming to bite us on the backside now. So shambles, without getting the full context, you're never going to know the full truth. Johnny might know more than what we do, obviously, but it's
I hope so.
Yeah, for me, I'd like to think so as well. But I just think for me, my biggest thing why I think shambles, I've used the word shambles, is I think in the Premier League, if you stand still, you get swallowed up pretty quickly. And I think Leicester City are only a prime example of that last season. They still had a good playing squad on paper. They didn't invest, and they got relegated. And that's my big fear is, if you stand still, we could get caught up. I generally think, looking at some of the sort of promoted sides that come up, I think Sheffield United and Luton, we should be coming above them quite comfortably. I think we might get away with only having to be better than one other team this season, but we could quite easily be that 18th team the way it's going. But yeah, time will tell. Like I say, I do still think you judge it at the end of the window, but I don't think we're getting anyone coming through the door at this rate.
Johnny, the plan A was that 10 or 15 million pound signing mark. Doesn't seem like plan A could be facilitated. God knows what plan B was, because it doesn't seem to be facilitated anymore. What's gone on?
It's a tough one, and in some respects, and I entirely understand the fans' frustration, but on another level, Fosun just can't keep pumping vast fortunes into the club every transfer window. So this day was always going to come. They didn't expect to spend the level of money they spent at the end of August last year. That was Jeff Shee looked me in the eye when we did Ask Wolves and said this was going to be a self-sustaining window where we sell to buy, we get our own revenue for transfers, and Scott Sellers did the same. And then at the end of the window, 100-odd million is spent once Chesterfield and Fosun get their heads together at a different meeting and the strategy changes. Now, they won't have envisaged having to go again last January, where they spent significantly, and they had a different manager who cost an absolute fortune to bring in with his coaching staff. The Wolves have never paid money like this before for a manager. We're talking around 3 times what you would expect to pay for a coaching staff, and it was huge money. So they've got that outlay as well. They just can't keep spending. So there was always going to be that issue of profits and sustainability that they had to keep an eye on. That said, that once they made the sales they did, they were okay. It wasn't an issue. And Jeff, in his letter, has said that in so much as he's talked about this being a benign challenge compared to all the other challenges. He's right. It's not the big issue, but they did have to rein spending in. Now, they've gone further than that, and what they've done, the strategy is clearly to recoup money so that they're not writing off loans, and Fosun want to see a return on their investment. And that this comes from China. It's not something that's done at home here, and that they're fully entitled to go about it that way. So a bit of me thinks Wolves fans have just got to suck it up and get on with it. Fosun isn't a cash cow. They're going to want a return on their investment. They're an investment conglomerate. But by the same token, I can understand the angst as we head into this season. Although it might not happen, but if you have got a fit squad and you look at the players in that squad, there's no reason why they can't have a solid season.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think that's probably the most frustrating things from a fan's perspective is we're probably only 3 signings away from having a really good squad. They've cleared out a lot of players apart from Neves who weren't starters, probably had come to the end of the cycle at Wolves. But with some of the pre-season performances, especially against Stade Rennais, like we're almost there. But do you not think, like you said, it isn't the case of FFP, which seems to be the narrative from local and national journalists who, I know it's all the stories broke at the same time, so it obviously come from the club, right? Is it just a case of like you said, what they want to get some of that investment back?
I think, it's clearly more than profit and sustainability. That's an issue. I don't think anyone's denying that's been an issue when you spend that sort of money. It's not the major issue. I think, and you say that seems to be the narrative. I think there's plenty of people out there who, my colleague Rob Dorset, a really good investigative football journalist, he tweeted at the start of July that with certain sales, Wolves were no longer treading a fine line on that. Yeah. He put that out over a month ago. There was a really interesting article in The Athletic a couple of weeks ago that I think they got Matt Slater involved. Now, he's one of the top football finance journalists. He's so good, and he knows he can crunch numbers. He knows football finance like the back of his hand, and he was quite clear that there was something more at play here. While profit and sustainability is bubbling away, and it's clearly a far bigger picture than that, especially when you're dealing with a club owned by an investment conglomerate and a club owned by a conglomerate that takes its direction from what's happening in Beijing. and the sort of the government of China. So yeah, it's just been a strange time with the ownership structure as it is. It's just different to what Wolves fans are used to. If Steve Morgan says there's no money, it's because he's not putting money in. If Sir Jack Hayward, he put tons of money in and he stopped putting money in just when they needed to. It's just different with Fosun. It's just very, very different. I don't think the club's hierarchy. Well, I know for a fact the club's hierarchy has been blindsided by changes from the very top at Fosun in strategy. And, we saw it last summer. The message coming out of the club was this is going to be a period of sustainability. And then they go and blow fortunes at the end of the window. It's just, it's very hard. So I know you say that, there has been a narrative amongst the press about FFP. I'm not sure there has. I think there's a lot of very, very well-respected journalists out there who are presenting something alternative.
Yeah, because I know I'd spoken to Liam Keane about it when he broke the news around it's because of needed to recast because of profit and sustainability. And I was like, as I said to him, I'm not saying that you're wrong and what you're reporting is false, but I just don't believe it. And perhaps that's because it's not what we want to hear as fans, maybe, Dave. But I just don't buy it that's the sole reason. As Johnny said there, that it's led from the top in China. Dave, do you think that could be the reason why we've supposed been bidding for players, and all of a sudden these bids that we're putting in, we can't even finance them?
Yeah, I think that was another thing that confused a lot of fans. Obviously, there was the rejected bids for Kilman, the 2 reported bids for Alex Scott, which apparently were all, they all happened. There were proper bids. So I really don't understand what's gone on. And I know, George, you sort of mentioned the Jeff Shee statement, which we'll probably talk about more, but I think the statement like that was probably a month too late. The damage was already done for Wolves fans. They needed to hear what Jeff was saying a month earlier, because in the end, somehow in dribs and drabs, we sort of already knew what Jeff was on about anyway. So I think it's a difficult situation, because you can't expect on the 1st of July, the club to come out and say, look, it's going to be a slow window because of financial fair play, because I think other clubs who are looking to buy our players can exploit that. But I don't know. I mean, as you guys know, I'm not overly clued up on the sort of finances side of football, but it just doesn't sound like something is right. But again, like Johnny said, we can't expect as a football club to keep pumping in, hundreds of millions every single transfer window.
Yeah.
If I could say one thing on that, Dave, I'm similar to you. I'm not clued up on finances, but I do. So I always go and speak to people about this, people who know much better than me. And there has been a bit of talk around, forecasts to change, and this money was, we thought we had this money, then we didn't have this money, and then I spoke to a risk manager high up who works at Canary Wharf for one of the main investment banks. Just to talk about this, and bearing in mind Wolves fit into this bracket, and a lot of Premier League clubs do. I said when Wolves or any Premier League club go seeking investment, and that bank or that financial institution gives them investment on future predictions, on forecasts, and this is really important. What is that club expected to reveal? And his exact quote was the whole 9 yards. He says, you do not get a loan. And Wolves have had one of those recently, but you do not get loans, you do not get finance if you present forecasts that change. As each financial year clicks through, a club would not be taken seriously if it presented a forecast to a lender and then went back 2 weeks later and says, actually, we're forecasting this. And certainly, and Wolves will know their forecasts and stuff. And that's what it's perhaps, fans have found hard to get their head around. Why is this changing? It's not changing. I don't think forecasts are changing. I think talk is when you go and try and lend money, you have to just open your books and say, this is us, this is what we've got. And people wouldn't be lending Wolves money if they weren't a safe bet. Yeah,
because they've recently borrowed, well, say recently, over the last 3 or 4 years, Macquarie Banking, I think they're Australian, aren't they?
Yeah.
They borrow against future TV revenue. But again, that's a risk in itself, isn't it? Because we might not be in the Premier League next season. So what happens with that?
Well, it will have been. There were promises that it would be underwritten elsewhere. You see, they would not get the finance. They would not get the finance if it wasn't. If they weren't seen as solid, they just wouldn't get it. And if they went, and this is why, again, this is why I don't think it's all about profit and sustainability. Because in previous years, Wolves have gone and sought finance, and in previous years, Wolves have operated within FFP regulations by putting their own money in to mitigate the losses. Now, that doesn't appear to be happening this time round, which indicates a change of strategy. And I would also say that Folkestone are well within their rights, having put all that money in, to change their strategy. Absolutely. Why should they keep writing off loans? Why should they keep writing things off? They have put so much money into this club, but it is an issue of strategy.
Yeah, and I don't want this to feel like I'm singling out local journalists either. Like we as fans, we've needed answers, and they've done their most to try and get those answers from the club.
Yeah, absolutely.
And fair play to them, because I know like Liam Keane and whatnot. They've been trying for us to get answers, and they've finally got this answer from the club. And again, whether it's right or wrong, they have got an answer. But again, people don't quite believe it, so now the club have had to speak, and it just seems, Jord, it just seems a bit of a mess.
Yeah, and I think Dave sort of hit the nail on the head a little bit. If Jeff would have come out, and again, there's reasons why he hasn't. If he'd have come out at the end of the start of pre-season or before all these whispers and murmurs come out, it might have been it might have been accepted a little bit easier. But you've obviously got almost like stuff coming out at different times through the press. We're buying Alex Scott, then we couldn't afford him. Like, it's just so many conflicting messages. Wolves fans getting wound up, and then again, this will come in a bit later on, but Lopetegui then having his like, I'm guessing, unsanctioned chats that have been released. It's just all smoke and fire and mirror and whatever you want to say. And like, for me, the Fosun stuff, like Johnny said as well, like as a business, you would not get finance from the government or Macquarie Bank or anything like that if you didn't have a pot to piss in. Let's put it like that. Like, they've obviously got finance, they've obviously got money there. So Fosun, if they really wanted to, could put money in. If they actually really want to, and they could go again and again. I think there's stuff with the Chinese government makes it harder for them to invest overseas. Not saying that's the be all and end all, but that's obviously changed since they bought the club. And also, like Newcastle, the new money coming into the league, your Newcastle and stuff. I think when they came in, when Fosun said we want to be Champions League in 10 years, and it was a nice, it's just words, but I think they probably genuinely believed it at the time. But you can't just spend tens of millions of pounds to break the Premier League. You want to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds year on year. And it could be the fact that Fosun have just turned around and gone, you know what? It's not sustainable for us. And you know what? There's no return on our investment. If we do that, we can't compete with these teams. And I think, as an investment company, Fosun will look at Wolves now as being in the Premier League. If they can get a return on investment, they've got all the branding, all that sort of stuff in the Far East, their esports, all that sort of stuff. Wolves is a brand for Fosun. As long as it pays for itself, it's worth keeping. Like, I don't think, there's fans saying they should sell up and do this. I don't think Fosun will sell. They might get other investment, but Fosun will not sell because it's so hard to get a brand with such a global audience. They won't want to give it up that easy when they've invested so much.
And there's not a long line of investors who are willing to go and spend 400 and 500 million pound on a football club. Like, there's just not many people in the world. But Johnny, I know we've spoken previously about investment and whatnot, and Jeff Shea has adamantly said the club is not up for sale. We're fully committed, but it seems to be, and I know you've said this previously, like they would welcome other investment into the club.
Yeah, absolutely. They've said that themselves. I think the issue is not so much that they don't want to give up. They put a lot of work into the club, obviously, and they don't want to sell it and see all that work go. I think the bigger issue is where's the buyer? Who would be the buyer? There aren't a lot of buyers for a club like Wolves. You could see the appeal of Newcastle straight away, a stadium fit for purpose, a huge fan base. Wolves needs a bit of work to sort the stadium out and other things. So is that big investment available? Obviously, people look at the Gulf states, people look at America. Where else is it going to come? But yeah, Wolves have been very clear that they're seeking investment, and that continues to be the case at 100%. Whether or not it's a wholesale, I don't think so. I mean, it was reassuring to hear read Jeff Shea in his letter saying, no, we're not up for sale. I mean, there have been other clubs owned by the Chinese that aren't up for sale that get sold. But it was reassuring from Jeff, and I feel, he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't with that with that letter. There's a clamour for him to speak, and there's probably only so much he can say. There are things that clubs just can't explain to supporters and the press. There's things that they have to keep to themselves. They have to protect they have to protect what they are, and it's really, really hard for any owner, to speak totally candidly and totally openly. So I think he probably put out there all he could, but I think it was as much about what wasn't in that letter as what was.
There's a lot of commercially sensitive information, like you said, Johnny, that just couldn't be said. But before we move on to Lopetegui, do you think the club will spend before the end of the window?
I think they could. I think there might be another one or two outgoings, and there was obviously. I think the Elvedi deal isn't far away in terms of where they're at with the player. I think the structure of the payments to the club probably aren't what the club wants. That's what was holding the Alex Scott deal back. I think Wolves offered the money, but they offered it over the course of his contract and not the big lump sum up front that Bristol City wanted. It's probably something similar with Borussia Mönchengladbach. So I don't know. It just depends. The closer and closer we get to the cut-off point, it's whether or not Wolves decide they do need to spend. And I think they probably do need a couple of additions. I just don't know. It's just hard to say. It's just there's just such fascinating times. I mean, they're worrying times on one level, but from a neutral perspective, it is quite fascinating what has been playing out over this summer period. And a lot of it has been Julian Lopetegui and his behaviour.
Yeah, Dave, most people, if you look at Twitter and whatnot, have us to go down. I don't know about you, Dave, but I quite like this underdog siege mentality that we're now getting.
Yeah, I mean, people have written us off. I think there's a lot of people listening to the press, and whether it's the news or on the newspapers, and there is just a lot of people. Every Premier League prediction I've seen online, whether it be fans or whether it be like a big publication, seems to have Wolves down in the bottom three. So I don't know. I mean, we could crack on with our own business. We stay under the radar. Teams are going to write us off. So like we said, I think the first 11 is okay. It's just all the crap going on behind the scenes. We just got to make sure that doesn't spill onto the field.
Yeah, I mean, at the start of the season, Lopetegui's future was up in the air, and then I think it might have been John Percy, Jord, who broke the news to say like he's sat down with the club and he's going to stay. But then news broke of the Guillaume Balaguy interview that looked like it was definitely was unsanctioned, because there's no way the club would have let that happen. And since then, Jord, it's been a bit of a shit show.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I mean, in that interview, they both said a lot of words without actually saying anything substantial within it, didn't they? They're almost saying, "Well, I might leave, but I might not," and there was just no need for it. And for me, it like, he wants out, doesn't he? Like, he absolutely wants out. I think he's trying to do anything he can just to, get himself out of the club. I think that's the truth of it. I think he's been sold in his opinion, he's been sold a dream. He's been sold a story that isn't true, and I think he's been putting out these interviews and he's been sort of kicking up a stink and a fuss to go, you know what, if Wolves lose their first 5-6 games of the Premier League season, he wants to basically keep his own personal stock to go, you know what, I said we needed players, the club didn't back me, I'm still a good coach, I'm still a good manager. He'll go elsewhere and get another job. So look, it's just not very, it's really uncomfortable and unsettling. Like, what are we, a week out? We almost played like 40 odd minutes against Man United at time recording. Like, to have all this stuff still going on, it's so unnerving, unsettling, and as fans, we don't want it. The club won't want it. But even as like a playing squad as well, there's going to be some players looking at social media or getting like whispers and murmurs and thinking, you know what, the gaffer couldn't be here by the time of next week. And it almost makes pre-season a bit redundant for those players that have played well and he's starting afresh and stuff. I think there's no two ways to say it. It's an absolute mess at the moment, and I hope it does get sorted out as soon as possible. But I can't see it getting sorted anytime soon.
Johnny, do you know what the relationship is like between Lopetegui and I know he seems to speak quite fondly about Matt Hobbs, but with other hierarchical members at the club?
I think there's a sense now that everyone's getting a little bit pissed off and thinking, you came here on an extraordinary contract with staff on extraordinary deals to what those staff had previously earned. You came here as this elite coach. Why didn't you just get on with coaching? You may have been made promises in terms of finance that weren't what you thought they were back in January, but you're not sitting here with the squad that Rob Edwards is sitting here at Luton Town. It's still a very, very capable squad. And if it means knuckling it down for a year and then things changing, it's just, I think there's a set, he went rogue, didn't he? He went rogue over in Spain and did this interview, or Portugal, wherever it was, and did this interview that he shouldn't have done. And it didn't help anyone. And it was, he didn't even say anything. Or the only thing you could gauge from that interview was that he was fed up of being there. But you thought, well, at least come out with something concrete that supporters can get their teeth into, other than that you're looking to strengthen the squad. And that seemed to be the gist of it. And then I do feel for the club with this one. What are they supposed to do now? I mean, this interview, let's be clear, this podcast is 8:45 on Monday, and this could be out of date by the time anyone listens to it. That's where we're at, in my opinion. That's where we're at. Because it's an incredibly developing situation. It really, really is. I think if he looks back at the way he's behaved, I don't know, it might be a cultural thing. It might be something that is more common on the continent, but I'm not sure that he's sort of carried himself as well as he could have done. Obviously, he's got his own concerns. The club are doing what the club are doing. I think it's close to being a relationship beyond repair. As I say, it's 8:45 on Monday night. That might have changed for the worse or the better by 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning.
Do you feel like the club have moved the goalposts from what you know, though, in terms of what he was promised and what now being delivered? That's
a good question, that. I mean, it was Matt Hobbs who said the project is back on, to a lot of fanfare at the start of the year. So this doesn't look like a project back on now. But by the same token, Lopetegui's a serious individual. He came here, he brought Fran Garagaza in as a sort of technical advisor, almost as a buffer to the board, because he was probably unsure about the way the club operated financially. He'll have done a reasonable amount of due diligence on the club before signing a contract. He'll have checked the place out. In fact, his staff were here long before he was here, checking the place out, going through things, and the signs were all really good then. So where have the goalposts been? The goalposts probably have changed, but I don't think they've changed enough for an elite head coach about to embark on his first full season in the Premier League to have taken such umbrage with the way things are panning out. Unless there's more to it behind the scenes that we're not party to. I do have a lot of sympathy with the club. I understand that a lot of people don't. That they think Wolves they're frustrated. Wolves have finally got this manager they've been courting for many years. He's a top manager, and yet they're seemingly not backing him. Well, I think they backed him in January, and I don't think the squad's horrific. I think there are areas that clearly need improving. I don't think it's horrific, but who knows. Do
you think it's a case of him not wanting to walk because of the payoff?
Hugely. Yeah. It's absolutely down to money. It's like one of these spaghetti western standoff. Who blinks first? Wolves can't afford to sack him because they've given him such a ridiculous contract. He can't afford to walk out on that contract because he's got a load of staff who've never been paid this money in their life before, depending on him, and he is on a huge contract himself. It's absolutely, it's one of those situations. If he goes, and he might have gone by the end of this podcast. If he goes, then a middle ground will have been sought and reached, because the numbers involved are just too big for either Wolves to sack him or or Lopetegui to walk. In my opinion, again, without being party to everything.
Looks like the club are contingency planning now, which is the right thing to do. They probably should be talking to other managers, because I think we would criticise them if Lopetegui walks and they didn't have a backup plan, like when Lage left. But Gary O'Neill seems to be the name today. Broke a couple of hours ago now, Alex Crook, and then the Mirror caught wind of it. Johnny, is there anything that you know about that, or any other names? Or
it's funny, because obviously when you hear Gary O'Neill, there's an initial Bournemouth's caretaker manager reaction, and there are people who think that's not good. He actually he's a very impressive person. He's well researched. He has strong ideas in how clubs should play, and I think he presents himself really, really well. I imagine he's impressed Wolves as hierarchy. He comes basically with a CV that says, I can get people out of a shit show. He took over after Bournemouth got beaten 9-0 at Liverpool last season. And he took over from a manager who, a bit like this one, was saying that it's going to be a long, hard season. I've not been backed. I've not got this. I've not got that. And Gary O'Neill quickly got the squad on board. And he quickly sorted things out. And he quickly stopped the big, heavy defeats. And the way he finished the season was really, really strong. I think he's a quietly impressive individual. And, I think people should, if he turns out being someone who ends up here, I think people should give him a chance. To go back to your initial question about should Wolves be sounding people out, most clubs sound managers out. There is actually, it's in the book actually, there's one occasion when Wolves didn't sound anyone out, when they sacked Mick McCarthy and found themselves in a right mess. They're then trying to get, it was Alan Kirbishley at the time, and Kirbishley just got cold feet, and they ended up chucking it Terry Connor's way. I think at every other situation, managers are sounded out. Lopetegui was sounded out when Fosun first took charge. Nuno was in the background for at least 2 or 3 months before Paul Lambert was sacked. These things happen, and beyond the walls of Wolves and Molineux, this thing happens everywhere. I think it's madness not to sound someone out, and particularly if it may be a bit harsh if you've got a manager innocently going about his job, doing a decent job, and suddenly finds the rug pulled from under him and finds out that all these Machiavellian figures have been stabbing him in the back. I don't think that's the case at the moment. I think Lopetegui has gone and spoken to external media and sort of put it out there. He's almost forced the club's hand.
Yeah, I remember Paul Barber speaking on TalkSport, who I think he's a CEO at Brighton, and he said we know what managers we need to approach if Graham Potter goes, if De Zerbi goes, and same with players. So you're right, it's the right thing to do, and you'd be a little bit concerned if they weren't. But Dave, what's your initial kind of reaction to the Gary O'Neill kind of links? Me personally, I don't think it would be a fantastic appointment. I think Bournemouth probably rode the luck a little bit towards the end of last season. But what were your thoughts?
Well, I think regardless of who Wolves go for, it'll be an extremely tricky job, because you're throwing in a manager right at the start of a season after the players have just had 4 or 5 weeks learning one technique or style of play, and then you got another manager. You'd assume Wolves will try and get someone whose play style and training is as close to Lopetegui as they can, if that's the case. But I don't know. I just think it's an underwhelming one. I think Lopetegui is sort of top end of the quality of managers that Wolves could appoint. So if he does walk, I think anybody is probably going to feel like a downgrade, especially as we were so excited about Lopetegui coming into the club. So, Gary O'Neill's not somebody that, fills me with huge excitement, but, I think there are worse managers out there. But like you said, I think you'd rather Wolves have this plan in place. I know Johnny mentioned there about the managers. There's a good extract from the Neil Warnock book as well. I don't know if that's mentioned in your book, about when McCarthy had been sacked as well. And I think Moxie and Morgan they made a bit of a mess of that appointment in the end. So, yeah, but O'Neill, I think it's an underwhelming one, Matt.
Yeah, listen, Dave, I'm not going to miss any opportunity to plug this book. We interviewed Neil Warnock for the book.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I grabbed him. I was doing an interview with him at Huddersfield at the end of last season, and I said, "Oh, by the way, Can you confirm a few things for us? I said, can you confirm you went into the dressing room at the end of the playoff final to say well done to the Wolves players? And he did. And he was talking about. And the other thing he did, he went up to Carden Park, where Steve Morgan lives, and he interviewed with Morgan and Moxie. And at the end of his interview, they said to him, right, we'll be in touch. And he came away and he said, oh, we'll be in touch. And Ken Bates, who's then Leeds chairman, rang him and said, I don't want to interview. I just want to give you the job. And Warnock said he actually would rather have gone to a Wolves, but it was Bates saying, I'm giving you the job, as opposed to Morgan saying, we'll be in touch. He said, no, they should have given me the job there. And then he also went on to say that with hindsight, going to Leeds was the worst thing he ever did. He said it was impossible.
I think in his book, he says something like, obviously he got off, I think that was the Saturday or something like that. He spoke to Wolves, and then on the Monday, he still hadn't heard anything. And I think he called Moxie and said, well, what's the decision? And they said, well, we're still looking at targets. And he's like, well, obviously I'm not the right man for the job. And then that's when he took the Leeds job as well. So
absolutely.
What could have been?
What could have been? You know what? I might be in the minority of one here. I love Warnock.
Mate, I love Neil Warnock as well.
We love him.
I'd have so loved him to have done a year at Wolves just to see what would have happened.
Yeah, it might be able to happen now, mate.
It's nearer to his house in Cornwall, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
You never know. You never know. I mean, we're going back to what Dave was saying before about being underwhelmed by Gary O'Neill and whoever it is. If it is a new manager coming in, I think Wolves really, really have to guard against that period of limbo that they had last season in between Large and Lopetegui.
Oh yeah,
when
100%.
It was just drifting. It was like some sort of canoe with no paddles out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It was just drifting. I think what Matt Hobbs and his team want to do is to make sure this club doesn't drift to go into the start of the season. I think, if when Lopetegui goes, there will be a replacement in place very, very quickly. And if there isn't, they really have got things wrong. They'd need to move very quickly.
Yeah, I know before we come on the podcast and you said about Gary O'Neill, because I said I wasn't too happy about it, and you said, quite positive about it. I asked you the question, what other Premier League club would have him? Have you had to think about that yet?
Yeah. No, you're right. If you're playing devil's advocate, what other Premier League club? You're spot on there. But I guess, managers come from all sorts of strange circumstances. And some are born out. One I look at is Stephen Schumacher at Plymouth. Ryan Lowe had Plymouth flying and they didn't get promoted. And all Plymouth did was appoint their number 2. And Ryan Lowe was meant to be the big thing. And sure enough, Stephen Schumacher gets them promoted. And he started this season great. Managers come from nowhere sometimes. And very often it's managers who've been assistants who are the brains behind things. A manager's got to start somewhere, and I think O'Neill made an impressive start at Bournemouth. You could equally say he got lucky with it sometimes, but they've got to come from somewhere, and maybe Wolves are feeling a bit burnt by going for a big name who appears to be going rogue on them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bloke at Botafogo, Portuguese bloke, who's doing quite well in Brazil. I wonder if we could try and prize him over. But Johnny, do you think he'll be in charge for the Man United game on Monday?
That's such a good question. I wouldn't like, if I had I always think if I had the last 10 quid in the world, where would you put it? I wouldn't like to put my last 10 quid on either scenario, but if I was absolutely forced into a corner to put 10 quid on him being there, I'd say he won't be. But that's not to say I believe. Yeah. That's not to say I'm convinced he's going. I'm not. I think it's really, really. I think it's tight. I think there's a lot. It's 5-9 now. A lot could happen between Monday night and next Monday. Nothing. I tell you what, nothing would surprise me. I'll say that.
If he does go, imagine the fan replies, like in general from football fans. That's it. The amount of money on Wolves to go down would be through the roof. Honestly.
You could get him at a really good price at the start of the season as well. I'm a bit gutted that I didn't back it. Johnny, do you think there could be an instance where Wolves and Lopetegui meet in the middle with the payoff?
Yeah, I think
they're just adamant that they're not paying it.
I think that's the only way he goes. I don't think he walks away from his contract, and I don't think Wolves pay him the length of his contract. I think that's the only way he goes, is if they decide to somehow meet in the middle. And I guess when you look at it, it would be the equivalent of a signing, wouldn't it? Say if they sort of signed off on 5 to 7 million or something like that, that would be the equivalent of, I don't know, bringing in a fullback or something like that. They might just say, we can't go on with this situation of a manager and a club being so at odds with each other. There's a point at which it becomes toxic. There's a point at which it becomes poisonous. Either the manager falls into line or they decide for a clean break. And that's at the point at which negotiations happen. And that's at the point at which they all agree to part company.
Yeah. That's what happened with I was going to say, that's what happened with Brendan Rodgers last year with Leicester, wasn't it? Like he had a £15 million relegation release clause, and he was like, "Well,
right,
pay me my money," wasn't it? Because that was toxic for a while as well, wasn't it? You could tell Rodgers had lost interest, and he was waiting for his money. And maybe it sounds like it's what it is here, right? Like the relationship's gone, manager wants out, and we've got to find a solution. But it's either, by the sounds of it, give Lopetegui his money or sign Aaron Creswell. So that's what you want to use your £5 million for.
I think luckily enough for Jeff as well, if you have a manager paid off, then I don't think it goes on the balance sheet for FFP either. I think it sits away from that, so it shouldn't be a problem. We'll have to have a whip around.
Who do you think the fans would side with in this case? The club, the fans side with the club because Lopetegui's been sort of moaning publicly, or back Lopetegui because the club have been so poor in the transfer window?
It's a really good question. That it really is a good question, because I think that there are merits to both sides of that argument. I think because Fosun raised the stakes and the ambitions amongst Wolves supporters so much that sometimes we forget just what Fosun have done for this club. I'm in my 40s and I've never seen days like this before. Yeah. And I think it's easy to forget just how much Fosun have transformed Wolves. It's also a case where you look at the waste, and I don't think we've had a good transfer window, particularly since the very first one when Wolves became a Premier League club and signed Jimenez, Moutinho, Traore, and Rui Patricio. So I think I have a bit of this feeling because I'm older than you guys, so a little bit of me, and my kid's growing up as a bloody Manchester City fan, and it's like he's not interested in it. And it's like I look at it and I just think we nearly had it with Nuno, and then typical Wolves, a global pandemic turns up, and it's like, what can you do? And then I just look at the waste since Nuno. There's been a fortune spent, and it's been a bit muddly. It's been a bit higgledy-piggledy, and I just think of the waste and think if the money spent since Nuno had been the same effectiveness of the money spent in that first transfer window, Wolves would just we'd be flying. What a team we'd be. And I just think a little bit of me is annoyed at the waste, and I can see fans being annoyed at the waste, and I can see why they might side with Lopetegui, saying we've got a manager here who at the top end of the European scale of managers. Give him his bloody money to sign Alex Scott and stop and let's get on with it. I can 100% get that, but you've got to. Fosun have done so much for this football club in terms of what they've put in. I mean, they could do with investing a bit in the stadium now. It's starting to look a bit bad, but that's another argument. If we're talking about staying in the Premier League, they haven't always gone about it the right way, but they've certainly put the money where their mouth is.
I mean, it seems a bit kind of daft to talk about how we thought pre-season's gone, because that could all be ripped up if Lopetegui's not here by the Man United game, Dave. But how do you think we've done pre-season? Are you happy with the performances? I mean, I personally have been quite impressed.
Yeah, I've been satisfied, and I think the game against Rennes on Saturday was fantastic, and I think not just the result, the quality of football that we were dominant throughout sort of 75 to 80% of that match, I would say. A really, really good performance. We've picked up some good wins, beating Porto. It was a strong Porto side as well. And even the Luton game, had some positives in it. So I think it's been a productive pre-season, for all the moaning and groaning and negativity behind the scenes and on social media, it could have been an absolute disaster. And I think we've shown, and Lopetegui has shown, this team is capable. And that's why can't even go 2 days of positivity, can we really, without something changing the whole situation and scenario with the club? Because, Saturday's game was really, really good. And arguably, we saw Wolves play some of their best football that we've seen in a number of months.
Yeah, Jord, I don't know if you managed to catch the game on Saturday, but I came away from that, watching that, feeling fulfilled and like genuinely pleased to watch the Wolves performance. And I can't remember the last time I felt like that.
No, well, I know. I was taking, I said sorry for you lot for going. Because I played golf and I ended up getting it on. Let's just say, I ended up watching it. Put it like that. And I was really, so pleasantly surprised with how well we played on Saturday. Because I was a bit underwhelmed with the Celtic performance. Luton, we huffed and we puffed, but it still felt like Wolves of old, no cutting edge or lack of cutting edge, should I say. And that was a really good Rennes team. We beat, they put 3 past West Ham, they put 5 past Forest, and again, realistically, those are the teams that Wolves are going to be competing with this season. I think when it comes to the league table, so it's quite a good barometer to understand where we are. And I think some of the players. I thought Nunes was fantastic. There was a low. I thought it was, and again, it sounds daft because it's a friendly, but I thought as Mateus Cunha's best performance of Wolves shirt. I thought he was unbelievable, and again, me and Matt were talking before the pod started, but I actually think it's probably done us a disservice how well we played on Saturday to those and go, you know what, this squad's all right. Because we do know we need a couple more, but how well we played, they'll probably think, actually, there's enough here. And there is enough quality in that team. I just think we have been goal shy over the last couple of years. There's no mistake about that. And you know what? I don't want to say like a new signing because it's so cliche, but Fabio coming back and Sasa coming back from his injury, you know what? We've got a refresh and new forward line there to go. So it is quite exciting. I think those problems could potentially go away.
I know the Luton was 0-0 and, like you said, could be perceived as underwhelming. But Johnny, I thought on another day we'd probably score 4 or 5, and the fact that we're now creating chances, which seemed to be the problem last season, for me it's almost like the goals will come.
I think what you've got to look at is the players who came in mid-season last time around, and he probably can even argue the ones that came in just at the start of the season were getting to grips with the Premier League, and now after a summer of pre-season training and a summer together, they're starting to show themselves a bit more, and that's why when you look at the squad itself, if on paper, everyone's panicking at thinking, God, we've not signed this, we've not signed that. All these players have gone. Well, a lot of those players were always going. People like Cody and Moutinho and Neves were always going. And then you look at the players, and then you see someone like Pedro Neto, even who's hopefully back to full fitness, and you just think that's all right. This,
I thought as well. The Neto had a half decent campaign for Portugal as well in the internationals beforehand. But Neto always seems to have a good pre-season, doesn't he? Even last year, he had a really strong pre-season. All the Arsenal links, then picks up a little knocker at the start of the campaign. So he hasn't really found that form again that he had during the sort of lockdown season. I hope it could be a big season for him. Yeah,
it's so frustrating. I was at that game at Fulham during lockdown when he got injured, and it was so depressing. Just watching him hobbling along the touchline and, no fans there or anything like that. And it was just, oh no, this is not what we need. And I think with Diogo Jota having been sold as well, it sort of exacerbated the problems of that sort of character who can unlock a defence. And we've never really had one since. I'm really conflicted looking at this squad because, I can get a piece of A4 in front of me and make a great case for why we'll be all right. And then on the same piece of A4, I can think, shit, we're in big trouble here. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's one of those, I guess consistency is what any team strives for. And if Wolves can start the season consistently with consistent performances from players who've shown glimpses of talent, then we'll be okay. But then, someone could equally come back and argue, well, what if this player gets injured and why this player hasn't been consistent, so he'll never be consistent? And then you're like, yeah, doom and gloom.
Jord, what are your thoughts on Cunha and Fabio Silva? Because when they've both been on the pitch, they look to have linked up quite nicely, but it doesn't, and not that it probably matters anymore. For me, it doesn't feel like Lopetegui really fancies Silva.
I think, and again, only going back to like how he played at Seville a little bit, I think he does fancy Fabio. I just don't think he trusts the defence. I don't think he trusts us enough to play that sort of system. I think it's too aggressive for the. I think he just doesn't trust us at the back. I think he's got every reason to that. I know we've always had like a decent defensive, record and stuff, but then, the way the last season ended with, what was it, 6 at Brighton, 5 at Arsenal. I can't even remember. It was cricket scores. Like, I think it's just a little bit too expansive for us. I don't think he trusts the players to play that system. I think if he really could, I think if Lopetegui had his way, I think he would play them both. I think he would play Cunha off a striker, but I just don't think he trusts what's behind him enough. I think the link-up play was really good, especially that second half as well against Rennes. And, it'd be very bold of Lopetegui, again, if he's there, to go to Old Trafford and play them both from the start. For me, I would do that, but again, he's got. I don't think he will do it. I think he sees Cunha as more of a number 9 than what we do on this pod. Put it like that.
I don't think it's just his pod, mate. I think it's like most
well,
fans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dave, what's been your thoughts on Kolasinac in pre-season? Personally, I've been really impressed. I'm almost quite shocked at how good he is with the ball at his feet. Personifies great touch for a big man.
Yeah. No, I think he's probably still not up to optimal, top fitness, but it's good that he's getting more and more minutes over the last couple of weeks or so. I think that's what he like. Even the short amount of time we saw him at Southampton, he brought other players into play. I think Luton, he had some really nice moments. He was unlucky at the one chance where the ball came over the top. I think at times he lacked that little bit of confidence and bravery to try things on his own, but I think that will come with more game time and sharpness on the pitch. But you watched I think it's the third goal, wasn't it, against Rennes? The way, he holds up the ball, it almost allows 2 or 3 more players to get forward, and then that's how we create the goal. So I think, you play, it's a bit of a weird sort of comparison maybe, but you play him and it'll almost be a little bit like Kevin Doyle. He's never going to score you 15, 20 goals a season, but he'll certainly help, bring other players into play and get more assists and score more goals. So I think he's a really handy option to have, whether he starts or whether he comes off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, you saw with the goal against Stade Rennais, Hwang's, he was integral in the build-up to that. Great strength, great touch as well. So he's definitely an asset to have and gives you a bit of a different kind of
that's the sort of thing. I don't know, like Johnny said, in terms of glimpses of players, but we have got players there that have either come back off loan or come back from injury. That again, and like you said, Jord, I feel they're going to be like new signings, but they are, and Fosun spent a lot of money, or Wolves spent a lot of money on Kolasinac. We're not just going to write him off. That's a 20 million quid player there. So let's see what he can do.
Very highly rated as well, Kolasinac. United were after him at one point, weren't they?
Same window as us. The start of that window. Yeah.
Yeah, but United probably read his medical.
Yeah. Looked at his ACL. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, Johnny, about just Wolves and just the general bad luck and being blighted by the pandemic, but that signing is Wolves in a bottle, isn't it?
Yeah, and even I think I did Bruno Lage's last sit-down interview before he got the push after the West Ham game, and even he admitted there was an element of. He said the exact words he used to me was, "We'll learn our lessons from that one," and I think they chanced him when he shouldn't have been chanced. I think it was a desperate situation for Lage. He didn't have the players he wanted available, and you could see that bit when Neto came off at West Ham, and then they chucked him back on the pitch, and then he got a further injury. I think, a bit of it was bad luck, a bit of it was incompetence. It's a bit of a thread in this book as well, that just when Wolves fans think they've found the good times, something comes and bites them. And it's been a thread of the Premier League era. When Wolves finally got promoted to the Premier League, Jack Hayward out of nowhere decided he'd turn the tap off and didn't spend. And then there was an element, and Jez Moxey was really good about this in the book, actually. There was an element of self-destruct about the way Wolves went from the Premier League to League One. They changed the captain. They brought some bad eggs in, and they lost control. Jez's exact words were, "We lost control of the club." And it was only when Kenny Jackett came in that it came back. And then obviously, the big one is absolutely the pandemic and the fact that that is entirely responsible for the end of Nuno. And had that pandemic not happened, we can only dream of what could have happened.
Yeah.
I know a lot of Liverpool fans, obviously, and it pisses me off that they're in a European final every year. And even when they have a bad season, it's like, isn't it terrible? Just Liverpool's luck. And I'm thinking, sod off. You're in a European final every year. I've waited my entire life for a European campaign, and it gets derailed by a global pandemic. That's bad luck. It's not bad luck that Mohamed Salah gets injured after 10 minutes. It drives me nuts. But anyway,
that's always the case with football fans, isn't it? I remember I went to Mallorca a few years ago, and I was sat watching Wolves in the bar. They were playing Palace, and I was like, God, it was. I think when Jota scored in the last minute, I was like, that was shit. Like, I need to bring some more players in. And just, this mank bloke turned around to me and went, "At least you've still got your fucking club. I'm a Berry fan." I was like, but it's like.
I think probably unless you're a Bury or a Rochdale supporter, you've got no right to complain.
Yeah, it's always we've always had it worse, but we always do a prediction at the start of at the start of the season on our pre-season podcast. The last season's predictions were a shambles. I think only Finn and I managed to get one of them right, but we're going to do it again this season. The first one is where are Wolves going to finish this season in the Premier League. Dave, would you like to tell us your prediction?
It's gone down one or two places since the start of the pod, to be fair. So I'm going to go 15th.
Jord?
I've got 16th.
Johnny, have you done a prediction?
I hate predictions. What can possibly go right with a prediction? I'm veering towards Dave's area. Maybe even a touch higher. The league gets the last couple of weeks of the season. You've got all these teams that might get relegated, and then it just goes to pot with a few wins here and there. I think somewhere between 17th and 12th, there's maybe about 2 points. So it wouldn't surprise me if Wolves are in that big lump of teams at the sort of near the bottom, but by the same token, well safe. It's going to be mad, isn't it? What an unbelievable season to try and predict Wolves when we don't even know the manager's going to be a week before it starts.
Thanks, Lopetegui. He's pretty much ruined our pre-season podcast. I put together a lovely agenda, and then 5 minutes before going live, comes and pisses all over it. I went with 14th. Finn, who's actually on holiday at the minute I think he's with Steve Bull, actually. He went with 13th. Dave, can I ask you which player is your dark horse for having a big impact on the first team?
I don't think this really counts as a dark horse. But I'd probably say Mateus Nunes. Is that a dark horse or not?
You're really putting your neck on the line there.
No, that's what I mean. I can't. The squad ain't big enough to pick out a player. I could say someone like Joe Hodge or whatever, but it ain't going to happen, is it? So, I'll go with Nunes only because he had such an underwhelming first season. I think he's going to really kick on this year and could arguably be player of the season.
Jord, who have you picked?
I've also been extremely controversial and gone Mateus Nunes. Because it's like Dave said, I think he had an underwhelming season last year, and I don't think it helped. He played about 5 or 6 positions, but I think he came to Wolves last year with the pretense he'd get a big move this summer, and I think from this year it's very shit or bust in terms of for him to get that move, because he could quite easily, if he has another poor season at Wolves, his career could sort of just dwindle a little bit and stagnate. Yeah. So I think he needs a big year, and I think in pre-season he looks a better player this year. Well, what we see, I think he looks a lot better for it so far in pre-season. So I'm looking forward to what we see.
Johnny, have you got a dark horse for?
I won't go with Nunes, but I think Jordan Dave is spot on. I would, if I was going to predict a player to have a decent season for Wolves, I'd definitely go Nunes. But if you want a more of a dark horse, did Sarabia play at the weekend?
Yeah.
He started.
Did he start?
Well, this was the first goal. Yeah.
I think he's got something about him.
I love him as well.
Yeah. So, and bearing in mind how he was so lightweight and so non-impactful last year, I think I'll go him as my dark. I think Nunes will be the standout player, but I'll go Sarabia as the dark horse.
Finn actually went with Sarabia as a dark horse, so I went with Matt Doherty.
I don't think he's a match out, do you?
I think he's in the starting 11, do you?
I think so. Now, I got a lot of
What
stick when
position?
Doherty was right wherever he wants.
Left back.
He's
or
probably
left.
our best. He's probably our best finisher.
Yeah, that's true.
I thought, well, probably I don't know. When he was at Wolves previously in the last season, I gave him a bit of stick because I thought he performed poorly from a defensive point of view. But I feel like I'm about to eat some humble pie. I reckon he could be quite an important player for us this year. Just he gets into positions that Semedo doesn't, and it's quite refreshing to see a right back gallivant upfield a little bit. Granted, he jogs back, but I don't know. I just think he could come up with some really important goals or assists for us this season. So that's my dark horse. And is he my starting right back? I think it depends on the opposition. I think if you want Wolves to create a few more chances against the lesser sides, then yeah. But Semedo, for example, against United, I think Semedo will play. So that's my opinion. Wolves related hot take.
What did Finn say for that one? Sorry, Matt.
Sarabia.
Oh, sorry, you did say.
Yeah. Wolves related hot take for this season, Dave.
Wolves not to be the lowest goal scorers in the Premier League.
Wow.
I was gonna, you know what? I'll push it even further. Wolves to be in the top half of goals for this season. There you go.
Wow, that is a hot take. Jord,
Yeah.
what's yours?
So mine could be ruined by what's been going on today, but I said Wolves to have 3 permanent managers this season. Now, I'm going from, if Lopetegui started the season, I thought it could go, we get someone in for a few months, they flop, and then, But
I'd class him as the first
Yeah.
one. George.
Yeah.
I'd class
So
him as the first
okay,
one.
you would. Okay, but if people are going to be pedantic about it, I've also got Craig Dawson to score 5 or more goals.
I like that.
Okay, that's fair enough. Finn's hot take is Wolves to beat all the promoted teams home and away for the first time ever in the Premier League.
Again, I don't think that's a bad shout.
Mine was Mateus Nunes to be in the top 5 most fouled players in the Premier League.
What, this season?
Yeah.
Mm.
Johnny, I don't know if you've got a hot take or an unpopular opinion.
I didn't. Do you know what? I didn't have a lock at this. But if I was going to say anything, maybe I'd say Gary O'Neill to be parading the League Cup around Wembley sometime in March.
Yes.
I don't know. I've no
I was
idea.
going to say
You've got to back it,
Yeah, manifest that one.
those Wembley tours are brilliant these days.
That virtual reality. Yeah.
Yeah. Is soccer aid at Wembley this year or what?
Dave, Wolves' top goal scorer this season.
Back the boy, Fabio Silva.
Jord?
I've got Mateus Cunha.
I went with Mateus Cunha too. So did Finn. Johnny?
Cunha. Yeah, Cunha.
On the odd one out.
A top assister, I went with Sarabia. Dave, who have you gone with?
I was tempted to say Cunha, but I think if Sarabia is on the set pieces, yeah, I'll say Sarabia as well.
Jord?
I've got Mateus Nunes.
Johnny? Who's going to get the most assists? Nunes.
Oh,
Nice.
Yeah.
And then we always do 3 wider predictions for the rest of the league. Dave, what are yours?
Forest to go down.
Yeah.
Spurs to finish top 4.
Yeah.
And this will be subjective, I think, at the end of the season. Sandro Tonali to be one of the flops of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to gauge.
Italian
whether someone's
tax,
flop
but,
or- yeah.
we'll
agree.
talk about it. Yeah.
Jord?
I've got Liverpool to finish above Arsenal. I've got Luton and Sheffield United to both get less than 30 points. I did have 25. I did have 25, but then I thought I'll give myself a bit of buffer, And then I've got Eberici Eze to get 15 goal contributions this season.
Ooh,
Nice.
With no Zaha, it's a shout, to be fair.
Yeah, definitely. Finn went with most yellow cards in a season ever across the league. Eddie Howe's time-wasting frauds not to qualify for Europe. And then Mason Mount to get less than 7 goals and assists this season. I went with, and there is a theory to the last one. I've got Bournemouth to finish in the top 10. I've got Newcastle to finish outside the top 7, and I've got Unai Emery to be gone from Villa by the end of the season.
Well, that's not sacked, but he could be headhunted, or
No,
leave.
sacked.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, you go okay. You got to change your wording then.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
sacked.
No, because he'll conveniently forget at the end of the season, won't he? When he's at Arsenal or something, yeah.
Purely because he's one of those, similar to Large, where like everything is like the nth detail, and they spend so much time in the classroom, and it's great when things are going well, but when you're losing games, players don't want to be doing that. And I think it's been the case with other places. It was the same at Arsenal. I just think it could go that way, especially with how many games we've got.
I know. I don't want to admit it, but I think they're going to have a good year. I do. It's
trying to manifest it, if I'm honest. Trying to manifest it. I've got in the notes that we're going to preview the Man United game, but I'm not going to bother because it feels daft, really, because we don't know what the situation is going to be. Dave will do a match preview anyway. But yeah, Johnny, let's have a little chat about the book before we go again. So where can people come to the launch night? It's this Thursday, isn't it?
Yeah, Thursday from 7 p.m. at the Cleveland Arms is the best place to come and get the book. You'll get a discount. It's free admission, and you'll also be a donation to charity from that as well. It'll be a really good chance to get some. I know loads of people who are coming along, and it'd just be a nice chance to get Wolves fans together before the season starts. It's not something that happens regularly. You know, we're a bit sort of we all live and work a bit remotely these days. And just to get a crowd of Wolves fans chatting about Wolves would be brilliant. And I think it'd be a really nice night, given what's going on at the moment as well. There's going to be so much to talk about. And I think it'd be a good way to open the season. We've got to wait until Monday, haven't we? The whole season. I'm working at the game, which is great, but the whole season is it's sort of not kicking off until after everybody else. So it's going to feel like the longest day and a half. But it'll be good once the season gets going. And do you know what? I very often think the case is true that when a season kicks off, a lot of the noise disappears and things just fall into place. It's been a long time since the last ball was kicked last season, and who knows? And sometimes when you expect it the least, things happen. And they always say the darkest hour is just before the dawn. So whether or not this turns out to be a season that we'll all treasure, who knows? But I will say that if the club are making mistakes, they're doing it honestly. And I will also say that they've backed managers down the years tremendously. But I will also say, I can 100% see why fans are so frustrated. So come and vent that frustration at the Cleveland Arms on Thursday night. And if we break a certain barrier, I'll buy you a pint.
Bosh.
Nice. Where can people buy the book if they can't get to the Cleveland Thursday?
If you can't get to the Cleveland, it'll be on sale at Waterstones, W.H. Smith in town, the club shop, usual outlets online, that sort of thing. Amazon, the rest of it. You won't sort of fail to find out where it's on sale with me and Bez relentlessly promoting it over the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, we'll be sure to give it a read to it as well, mate. And I'm looking forward to giving it a read too. But Johnny, thanks again for coming on. I really, really do appreciate it. I know it's a late one, and I mean, as it stands, it's still newsworthy. Dave,
put it out now before it becomes the most out of date Wolves podcast out there.
Dave, go and put the kettle on, mate. Get your editing socks on, and have a go at it. But yeah, Johnny, absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on. Where can people find you? Should they wish to follow you? Well, no, they probably already follow you, but
at Sky Johnny P. So Sky JOHNNYP on Twitter. And I think it's Johnny Phillips Insta on Instagram.
Dave, where can people find you?
Yeah, it's at Dave as a party on Twitter and Instagram.
Jord, live from Oxfam stockroom.
I'm saying, no, this is going to change this year. So when you were asking earlier about what am I doing this summer, this is the start of my summer project. I'm in the loft. It's my missus's, I said walk-in wardrobe, and Matt said loft room. So this will be changed before Man United. There'll be a nice curtain. It'll all be sorted. But yeah, none of these are going on Depop or anything behind me. She's keeping the clothes, so and I don't wear them as well.
What's your vintage account, Jord? Yeah.
No, so at Jord7 on Twitter and Instagram. And Johnny, I think you forgot about LinkedIn. You can plug yourself on LinkedIn on this channel as well. If you're on LinkedIn,
really?
Yeah, it's one of those
we do like
podcasts.
we do like LinkedIn, yeah.
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn, but I don't know.
There you go.
Has that got usernames or anything?
That's just your name, isn't it? Johnny
Your
Phillips
name,
on
yeah.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, just my name. I was big. I was thinking I was going to have to be big on LinkedIn when all our jobs were up in the summer, but things are all right now.
I know you mentioned earlier, Johnny, you said you're in your mid 40s and a little bit older than all slot, but
I knew this was coming up.
I think George's eyes lit up.
Yeah.
I looked
Cheers,
at Jord, I
mate.
looked at you,
Obviously.
man. I thought,
Yeah, there's a
there you
running
go.
joke on this podcast that George's about 50 odd, but he's only mid 40s, so looking well. That exposure coming off his screen's doing the world. They're good for them wrinkles.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, yeah. It's a nice camera, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm M Cooper Wrights on Twitter. Of course, we are talking Wolves across all social media platforms, including LinkedIn if you wanted to connect with us. Let us know in the comments section down below your thoughts as we head into the Premier League season. Will Lopetegui stay? Will he go? Who's to blame? Whose side will you take? And of course, if you are new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Big thanks to Johnny Phillips as well. And make sure you get on that book, Revolution of Wolves, out in all fantastic bookstores and online retailers by the end of the week. But until next time, keep the faith, take care, and see you later.